I wanted to get this beautiful video done for the anniversary, but with time restraints, with work and everything, I figured it might just be better to get my story out there instead. And so, welcome to How I Found Fire Emblem JaeAIK Edition, featuring a bunch of B-roll footage. It's no secret that I absolutely adore Fire Emblem, but in order to understand this story, we gotta go back to the beginning. I grew up in the small town of Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is important because if you look through my yearbook, I was one of the 4 Asian kids in my entire elementary school. There were no other Asians here, period, in New Mexico, but my parents, who wanted to stay close to their roots, found a Korean church way out in the middle of nowhere. They would drag my sister and I there almost every week. And even then, there weren't many Koreans, so the age range between the kids were vast. In fact, I was one of the younger kids there, the bratty little brother that the older kids were forced to play with because their parents told them to. And so every Wednesday night, my parents would go out and converse with other parents, talking about whatever is going on in their lives, while us kids were shafted into a room where we would play video games. This meant that whatever we did, we kind of had to do together, or at least take turns doing, and it also had to be on the Nintendo GameCube because that was the only thing readily available to us at the time. So from games like Mario Kart, where we would have to team to race, or Sonic multiplayer, etc., were all games that we kind of liked playing. But even amongst the vast titles of multiplayer games, Super Smash Bros. Melee still stood above the rest as our favorite to play. Even back then, when we had no idea what mains really meant, there were characters that we always ended up gravitating towards. I'll admit I was never really a Marth or Roy player. I played Mewtwo because I thought Mewtwo was cool, but for the other older kids, they found the mystique of Marth and Roy as cool. And so when it came down to business as in our prides as gamers on the line, there were oftentimes many Marth vs. Roy duels on Final Destination. And after so many duels on Final Destination, it was only natural that our curiosity of these characters got the better of us. So after a bit of research, my hyungs, honorifics of older brothers in Korean, found that they had ties back in a game called Fire Emblem. And after finding out about Fire Emblem, they went out, bought the game, and would bring their Game Boys to church almost every week and talk about who their new favorite characters were and how some units were better than others. I still remember one of the most striking conversations they had was about how Lowen, when promoted, was like the Golden Piss Knight because of the color of his armor. It's still hilarious to me whenever I see Lowen to this day, but it's still incredibly immature, and you can imagine how stupid and naive we were as little kids. I remember watching my hyungs duke it out in the arena, all showing off their Athoses, or their Jafars, or their Sanes, as the conversation at that time was about how Marcus steals EXP and how Sane is much better off with investments. Or how I would sit down with them and watch them play the Fog of War map with Uhai and seeing Knos's Druid critical hit animation and being so awed by how cool it looked. And perhaps it's these reasons why I look at a lot of these Fire Emblem 7 characters, and more specifically Knos, so fondly. And it would be a perfect ending if I was able to get my own copy of Fire Emblem and play alongside them, but that wasn't necessarily the case. I never got to play Fire Emblem since my parents didn't really want me to get into video games, which is understandable. I can't blame them for that, but life truly finds a way, and I still got to play this series that I visually fell in love with. Though a little bit different than I think how most folks would find Fire Emblem. It wasn't until my cousin flew in from Korea later in my 5th grade year where he would teach me, quote, methods of playing Game Boy games on the computer. So through these methods, I finally was able to play Fire Emblem 7, but in Japanese. Looking back in hindsight, finding an English version of the game wouldn't have been difficult. But my cousin only knew one way to get these games, and it was through a Korean website, Naver, where people could upload files to their personal blogs, including these files to the games. And because Japan is so close to Korea, it makes sense that Japanese Fire Emblem 7 was the way to go. However, despite it being in Japanese, I was still ecstatic. This was the moment that I was waiting for, and my opportunity to play the game had finally arrived. But the game wasn't as easy as I remembered it, since we couldn't read anything. The first Seize Throne chapter and chapter 2 of Lin mode proved to be really difficult for us, not because we didn't know how to beat enemies, but because we literally did not know how to read Seize in Japanese. And through a lot of trial and error and a lot of lost time and much discussion between my cousin and I, we finally managed to seize the throne. Needless to say, we felt really stupid about it afterwards, but I think it's really funny now that I'm looking back at it. And within a week of us getting the game, my cousin and I had finished our first ever playthrough of Fire Emblem, dragon killed and everything, but it was at the cost of half our army being killed and none of the enemy units recruited. We killed Marcus of all characters. How do you have Marcus get killed in easy mode? And how are we supposed to figure out that the obvious hints of Guy randomly remembering Matthew when we couldn't read it? We even had to sacrifice Kanos to the fire dragon at the very last chapter of the game because we neglected to train Hector up. So we had a base Lord Hector sitting there while we had to somehow beat the dragon with Eliwood, Lyn, Athos, and Kanos. It's all really funny in hindsight, but it was a rather difficult challenge for us at the time. I remember going to church the following week and telling my Hyungs about how I finally got to play Fire Emblem and how our runs went. They laughed at our struggles and taught me how to, 1, reset my game so that I'm able to get the super secret ending. Not that it mattered anyways, since we couldn't read or even figure out that it was Roy. And 2, how to recruit the enemy units in the game. And so we were back challenging ourselves once more, but as much more experienced tacticians this time around. Looking back, it's odd how I got to first experience Fire Emblem. My Hyungs found the game through what I think are very traditional means at the time, which was play Smash, find Martha Roy cool, find their game, play game. But I was always sort of a bystander. I got to experience the games that they liked mostly by watching since I was the younger kid of the group. And when I finally got a chance to play the game, it wasn't on the Game Boy, but on the computer, with Japanese text. But would I have it any other way though? Not really. This let me experience the game in a very weird way, where things that I would see would be determined by units that performed incredibly well or were incredibly flashy. I still think every single one of Lyn's critical hit animations are one of the most baller things I've seen in a video game, and I also remember meeting Pent as a green unit in the desert blowing everything up. And it's thanks to all these magical moments in my first playthrough that has me still playing this game almost 15, 16 years later. I understand that how I found Fire Emblem isn't conventional by any means, but I'm sure glad that I did. This has been JaeAIK, thanks for watching.